I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today we're talking with author Shamichael Hallman, so stay with us for a conversation with Shamichael. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Youth Villages. Shamichael, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You are an author. You also write a lot and think a lot about libraries and community and libraries in the biggest possible sense. You also were manager at Cossett Library for some years. You left years ago and are in DC now.
Yeah.
What do you think? You came back, we were talking before we started, the new Cossett Library. What do you think?
Oh, it's everything that we had hoped it would be, So I first started having conversations with Memphis in 2016, joined the staff in 2017, and we started that process of thinking about what the renovation might be. There was already a good deal of community engagement work that had happened there, but the question was, how could we reimagine this library to be something that would be truly special for the community? And when you walk in that place now and you see the cafe, you see the recording areas, you see the multi-use sort of performance space, and all the programming that is there is exactly what we knew it could be.
And it is, it's the kind of thing you write about. It's the kind of thing your former boss, Keenan McCloy, friend of the show and head of Memphis Libraries, Keenan has been on the show, and it is always amazing to talk to her about all the things that are going on in the library system and what libraries mean. Cossett is kind of a culmination of that in some ways, that it is both for that community, for downtown, but for the whole city, and it is so much more. And there's nothing wrong with it just being books, right, but it is also so much more than just the books. And that's the way you've written your book, Meet Me at the Library, a place to foster social connection and promote democracy. That came out of this belief in the importance of libraries as a much bigger thing. Yeah,
it did, absolutely. And I think you're right. When you think about Cossett, it is both a neighborhood branch and then also a destination location. Right, and it's a trend that we're seeing in lots of libraries now, that across the country, as libraries try to make spaces more welcoming, more inclusive, places that are used by a majority of the community, that strategy of both local and a sort of hyper local and to the broader community is there. But yeah, to really come out to what you said, when I joined the Memphis Public Library team, I had a background in ministry and in technology. I did not have a background.
Say it again. That's a funny mix that we should pause on, but it's also very, I don't think you're from Memphis originally, but you were in Memphis. It's a very Memphis mix.
Yeah.
So, technology and ministry, so don't just jump past that.
Oh, well, no, yeah. So before coming to the library, I worked for New Direction Christian Church under Dr. Stacey Spencer. A lot of folks know Dr. Spencer. I led up technology there. Of course, I was an associate pastor there. But while I was doing that, I also co-led a global Christian-based hackathon that we did, throughout the U.S. and many other countries. And I think that was some of the things that Keenan said, hey, this would be an interesting mix of skills to have in a library manager. So I want you to bring that with you.
Yeah, and a hackathon, for those who aren't close to it, is what?
Essentially a 48-hour design sprint where people come in with just an idea about a piece of technology, and spend that time trying to create things. So, I think one of the really amazing examples that I pulled out, there was a gentleman in San Francisco who had got divorced a couple years before the event, and he spent every evening jotting down how he felt, some word, how he felt. Maybe he was sad or frustrated. He would write out a couple of thoughts about that. And then he'd go and find some scripture. Like, hey man, what's giving me some solace? What's giving me some comfort? And he said, what, maybe I should put this into an app. Maybe I should design an app around this.
Oh, wow.
And he actually created this really cool app that walked people through emotions and took those emotions and tied it to scripture. And then from scripture, helped them memorize the scripture, right? And I saw these sorts of things all over the place. Actually, right before COVID, I was in Uganda working with a group of African technologists who were trying to combat corruption. So I brought all of that to the library.
Yeah. The book published in, again, Meet Me at the Library, published in October.
In October,
last year. Yeah. First book?
First published book. I did, based off of that the hackathon, I did write a book, another book about sort of this intersection of faith and technology, but it was years ago. So this was my first sort of real big effort of trying to communicate an idea.
Talk about some of the themes in it. I mean, we talked a bit about the idea that the library is more than a library, but it's also a place of community and convening and so on.
Yeah, so of course the work that happened at CASET and still happening at CASET was very closely tied to the Reimagine the Civic Commons initiative. And of course, from that you get River Garden, you get things that are happening along the riverfront. It's a really amazing initiative that's playing out across the country. And that initiative is trying to advance a couple of things. One of which is socioeconomic mixing. So, the degree to which at any given time in a public space, a park, a library, a community center, you have a diversity of people that are there in conversational distance with each other. The other one is around civic engagement. So the way in which you can use public space to really get people to have a sense of civic pride. And I was very interested in those two things, to like, how do we do these better? And if the library succeeded in being a place where everybody showed up, well, what happens what happens when everybody shows up? What happens when you get every segment of the community together, across race, across class, across politics, across faith? What does that look like? And how do you do that? And so the book really is trying to take a look at the library, not just necessarily thinking about the books, but thinking about sort of two very real things that are happening in our society right now. One is around social isolation. We know that people are as lonely as they have ever been. We see all these stats, indicators of people spending time with family, spending time with friends, spending time with neighbors. All these indicators are going down, right? And also the political polarization, right? People have stopped talking to friends and family members. And for me, the book was, and this was after a number of conversations with libraries across the country, what role might the public library have in reversing some of these trends that we were seeing in society?
Again, we're here with Shamichael Hallman. He's an author. He was formerly manager of the CASET Library and has been, working in all the kind of spaces that he just talked about. The divisiveness thing and the polarization is really interesting to me. We did an event, Daily Memphian did, with readers and subscribers recently, a couple weeks back. And one of the things people are talking about is the comments in the Daily Memphian. And the comments in the Daily Memphian are kind of for lack of a better word, controversial space because people disagree. We moderate to a degree possible, that there's certain things you're just not gonna be able to say that are racist or sexist or hateful or, and there's language, swearing that we're not gonna allow. But one of the things I always say to people, and we try to say to people, is we're not moderating comments to match our editorial philosophy or the opinions of the many different people who are at any given point in the day moderating those comments.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to this point as a country where it becomes really, it's not okay to not hear what you agree with. Yeah. If you hear something, it's just like that is just so, and you don't hear it, you just fight it.
Yeah.
And that somehow we as a news organization, and this has happened, and I think it's part of the polarization, divisiveness in the country, is so much media now is of a certain point of view.
Sure.
Left, right, centrist, break it down even farther. And one of the criticisms we'll get about the comments and even about articles is when we write an article about this thing was proposed at city council. Some of the people thought this, some of the people thought that. This is where the vote went, the end. We will get criticism from people who say, you took the other side. Because we didn't conclude that process ended in a good or bad position. And they're so used to that from especially cable TV news.
Right.
And it's all of them. But even, a whole lot of what we used to think of as print media, but now, online media is really inherently analysis of the issue leading to a conclusion that this thing was right or wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not what we do. We do it in opinion pieces,
sure.
And that we do it all day. But I think that it kind of as I was thinking about talking to you, it plays into that struggle we have that we feel very strongly about, that we're not here to tell you what you should think. Yeah. We're here to relay ideas, to give some analysis, to talk, to give opinion pieces where that's appropriate. And I think, I'm not saying there aren't other news sites and newspapers that do that, sure. But it is under threat, I feel like.
Yeah. But I think that this is, what you're saying is very closely situated to a public library.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
At its best, you are able to walk into the public library and on any given topic, see a variety of books written by a diversity of people who have a diversity of viewpoints, right? And the library is sort of just being the container by which you can go and pull books out. I mean, certainly when I was working at the library, there were lots of books that I was like, that's not really for me, right? But the library is doing its job in that, right? There should be something in there that makes you question a little bit. And so what I was seeing was then a number of librarians, library professionals who said, oh, well, we can engage people across these things. Like we can use our collection, our resources, and actually foster conversation. And so I went and visited a number of libraries that were doing exactly that. I think a lot about in the North, I went to North Liberty, Iowa, and sat down, and there is a series there in the library called Lighthouse in the Library. And the librarian there, Kelly, she's amazing. She does exactly this. Hey, what are the issues, primarily on a local level, that people are passionate about? She then goes and sees, okay, what are the books that I have in the library that talk about that issue from a range of things? And then let me find the people in the community, the nonprofit leaders, the activists, and bring them here, create some structure, and actually let people have a conversation about that. And I don't think people think about that when they think about a library. Your mind doesn't really go there. But in reality, I came across literally hundreds of librarians who are doing this in their community each and every week, who are creating a container, a safe space where people can engage about issues. Now, of course, it does, as you said, it does get very contentious sometimes. And some librarians are backing away from that right now. But I'm encouraged by what I've been seeing.
We'll talk more about all that with Shamichael Hallman, author of the book, Meet Me at the Library, A Place to Foster Social Connection and Promote Democracy. People will know more about you. We're not done yet, but Shamichael Hallman, just search for Shamichael Hallman and they'll find you. But you have a website. Yeah. I think you've done a TED Talk that is on there, all those kinds of things. And they can buy the book, Amazon, wherever they want to buy the book. Okay. But I'll take a moment to do some housekeeping and remind everyone, I'm Eric Barnes, and this is The Sidebar. It airs here on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, focused on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. It's not just a radio show, though. It's one of a number of weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Memphis Grizzlies podcast, our food podcast, Soundbites, and another podcast that shall go unnamed that is launching soon or may have launched by the time this airs. So every morning, 5 days a week with Mary Cascioli and produced by Natalie Van Gundy. But I'm not supposed to talk about that. We also host the podcast version of Behind the Headlines, the TV show we produce with the folks at WKNO every week. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You can get this show and Soundbites, our food show, hosted by Holly Whitfield at WYXR.org or on the WYXR app. It includes all the WYXR shows, the talk shows and the music shows and archives of those. So it's a great way to keep up with what's going on at WYXR. If you're not a member of WYXR, do consider becoming one. You get all kinds of benefits, and it does support nonprofit, listener-supported radio. You can also just do a one-off donation, again, at the website or on the app. And if you're not a paid subscriber to the Daily Memphian, do consider becoming one. We are the largest newsroom in the region, and we are a nonprofit. We rely heavily on subscriptions for over half of our revenue, advertising, and so on, but you can also do donations to support the work that we do. Coming up soon, I mentioned Behind the Headlines. We've got folks from MIFA and the Aging Commission talking about some of the impacts and potential further impacts of federal spending cuts on the work that MIFA and the Aging Commission does. In recent weeks, we've had Jenny Robbins from the CEO of Church Health. We've had Steve Mulroy, the district attorney, Josh Spickler from Just City, Bill Gibbons, former DA and head of the Memphis Shelby County Crime Commission. We've recently had Pat Mitchell-Worley. Was a great conversation. Pat's always great, from Stax, Soulsville, talking about the new awards program they just announced. We had Jeff Kolath, formerly of Stax, now at the Sultana Disaster Museum. That was a great conversation about the upcoming museum over in West Memphis. And Carrie Hayes, friend of the show, was nice enough to have me on his podcast, Clap 3 Times, about music and some of the favorite music a person has. And we put that in the sidebar feed for people to listen to. But we are here with Shamichael Hallman, author of Meet Me at the Library. There's been a lot of news over recent years of really at the state level of restrictions on books, banning of books, getting away. It's what some people would very much agree with, and others would say was just pure politics of lot of DI related stuff, LGBTQ related stuff. But I can remember back to when I was in high school and earlier, whenever I kind of woke up with these things, there have always been these huge debates about what books should be in a school and in a library. You can think of Huck Finn, you can think of the work of Faulkner. And, I sit here and I haven't read Huck Finn in a long time, but I really liked it at the time. There's some of William Faulkner books that were just amazing and transcendent reading experiences to me. I think back on those books and I'm like, whew, those are rough. I mean, that's rough. That's some rough stuff right there. That's some language you don't hear anymore, And you can say that about book after book after book. I feel like I pose it as a question to you. How do you reconcile those things? And how do you think a library best manages those changes in attitudes, maybe the beliefs of a given community versus another community? How does that best managed?
Yeah, and this, I think plays out very different depending on where a library is located, But I want to go back to something that I said earlier. I think the library is built in many ways on open, free access to knowledge and information. And the idea that you should be able to see a variety of things is important to the library, right? Like, if not for the library, where else can a person go to engage with a variety of topics? There's so many stories. I was talking to a friend a couple of months ago, and he was telling me about the first time he went into the library looking for a book that talked about what it meant to be a young gay individual. And he said there was very few books in the library, but there was one particular section that had the book that he wanted, and he felt very sort of apprehensive about getting this book. He would go in the library a couple of times and sort of, is there anybody looking? Let me sort of scope things out a little bit. I see where the book is. If I could get the book, where could I go so that people wouldn't see me, right? And so he talked about this sort of month-long ordeal of scoping things out, trying to figure out, okay, the book is this size. Could I get another book that was a little bit bigger so that I could hide it in there while I was reading it, right?
It's funny, but not. It's also sad.
It's sure sad. Yeah. Well, he says, but then one day everything worked out. I got the bigger book. I got my book. I found the corner in the library where nobody would see me. And I opened the book and it was like, wow, this is me. I feel so seen in this moment. I feel so seen in this moment. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, right? For people to be able to go and not only be affirmed in who they are, but also, maybe that wasn't him. Maybe that was a family member, right? Maybe that was a friend who was just trying to understand what it's like to be in this guy's shoes. And they go get that book and now they understand, right? And so I think, again, every book may not be for you, but that may be the exact book that somebody else needs to help them understand this rapidly changing society that we live in.
We were talking before the show, we were talking about during COVID, and we were actually, all three of us here, talking about what times that we've gotten COVID. But it also reminded me of the work that the library does, that Keenan has been on the show talking about before, Keenan McCloy, the head of the library system. I think you were delivering food with MIFA, right? And I just meant MIFA is going to be on the show on the Behind the Headlines this week. Talk about that outbound, outside the building. I mean, we've talked a lot about it with you and Keenan and others about all the things that go on in the library building beyond books, but also the outreach. I mean, Keenan, I remember she blew my mind one time. I didn't realize the extent of is it 411? Is it 311? 311.
Yeah.
The extent of services that the library did. And I think this was also during COVID. So they were ramping up. You were there then, ramping up all these questions, all these services, all these needs that people have. And then you, part of the library staff, out there delivering food, unfortunately got COVID as part of it. But that outbound and outside the walls kind of work of libraries.
Well, I want to say, and I haven't been employed with Memphis Public Library in 3 years now. But Memphis has a world-class library. I've literally been traveling the world, telling people about the things that are happening with the Memphis Public Library, and they marvel, just like you, right? And so much of that is because of this outward approach, this sort of looking outward to see what the community needs, and whether it is, through 311, through the continuous outreach, I think Memphis just kind of sets the standard. As you mentioned, during COVID, I remember we had a number of staffers who were sewing masks and trying to be there. A lot of people were coming to the library because it was the only place you could get Wi-Fi. Right? People were in the parking lot, on their phones, because that was
holding their phone out the window, with a mask on. Yeah, right. It's funny, not funny.
Yeah, but even now though, as you think about the library really is posted everywhere. The library, they're in the school, they are in the community center, they're in the community, just meeting needs, using resources to meet needs. And that, again, I think also is something that people don't think about when it comes to the library. And this is one thing that I'll say, and I'll say this earlier, when I was saying that, when I got to the library, I didn't have library experience. I didn't know how to talk about libraries.
Oh, really?
And so I would listen, I would listen to, like all of the major players in the library system. And everybody was saying, oh, the library is more than books. The library is more than books. The library is more than books. And that's exactly what's happening at Costa. Like it was more than books, right? It was a whole recording area up there. But since I finished the book, I've come back to rephrase that. And I don't say the library is more than books now. I now say the library is books and more.
Yeah.
It's a very, very small tweak, but it does go back to what we said earlier about the importance of the right to inquiry, the intellectual freedom, to be able to have access to these things. And then, of course, yes, the library does layer on all of these other services. One of the things in a role that I do now, I spend a lot of time with librarians who are supporting entrepreneurs. And it's been really fascinating to see the sort of domains. Libraries are stepping into maker spaces and co-working spaces. They're adding heat presses and sublimation printers and all these sort of interesting things. They have these really expensive databases that will help you do market analysis, do pricing strategies, figure out where to launch your brick and mortar, right? And these would be databases that will literally cost you a couple $100, right? Which your library card is absolutely free. And we put together actually a calculator to help libraries just in this area calculate the economic impact. And what we're seeing, $7, $8, $9 million of economic impact across space, across research services, books, databases, classes and programs, right? Library really does an incredible job that often folks just don't recognize.
Yeah. With a few minutes left here, again, not to be political, it's not a political show, but it's out there. And I mentioned it with MIFA, the existing federal cuts and maybe others that are hitting MIFA and aging programs and other. What do you see nationally in terms of, I mean, I maybe assume falsely that community libraries are primarily focused by their local city, county, maybe the state, and not a ton of federal, but maybe there is a lot of federal money that goes into
There is a lot of federal money that makes its way from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to state libraries, and state libraries send that money, particularly to small and rural libraries. I mean, there have been some libraries that I've gone to over the last year, which is literally a library of two people. Just staff of two people, in some very small town in Vermont or, Wyoming. It's two people who are doing the thing, and they are doing all the things. They're doing the after school program. They're doing the, things for seniors. And a lot of those programs are not going to make it. Without the funding, those programs are not going to make it. And when you do a sort of a landscape analysis of who else in those communities can actually do that work, there are very few other organizations. And so you're going to have, unless we're able to reverse and really strongly advocate for library funding, we're going to have some of the most marginalized people and some of the smallest and rural townless communities who are going to be without.
Do you see philanthropy? I mean, everybody's asking this question now, I think, in a lot of spaces. Where cuts are happening. Does philanthropy step in? I mean, there's not unlimited philanthropy in the country, but... Right.
So, I mean, that's the issue. I mean, I have seen philanthropy absolutely step in. Foundations of all sizes are stepping in. But, that again, those funds are limited, and that's often to sort of just keep a Band-Aid on it, until some other funding comes available. So, ultimately, if the libraries are going to exist and continue to thrive, some of that funding is going to have to come at the federal level.
All the traveling, how much more traveling are you doing? How many more, are you just going to...
lots more traveling.
More traveling.
Yeah, lots more traveling.
For the book, for libraries, for research, all that.
Yeah, heading back to Europe, heading to Denmark in a couple of weeks here. What I love about the book is that it's given me an opportunity definitely offers some affirmation to librarians. But it's also putting me in a place to talk to planners, urban planners and designers, other community-based organizations who are now taking another look at libraries. And that was really why I wanted to write the book. I didn't, libraries, they know this stuff is happening. They know all these great things are happening. It's the other people in the community who maybe didn't know that I wanted to sort of reintroduce the library to them.
Yeah. Are you building thoughts for another book or even started on one? Or?
Well, I mean, I think this idea around trust, the trust that people have in the institutions and the trust that people have in each other, I think is very, very interesting. For the book, I spent a lot of time talking to libraries who were hosting programs to try to bring their community together. And I got a lot of great information from there. What I'm very interested in now is the people who showed up to these programs. Like I'm very interested in their motivation. Like, hey, there was this program at the library where folks were talking about water access or they were talking about DEI. Like, why did you come to that? Like, what drew you to that? And like, how did it impact or how did it shape or how did it change your life? And so that's something that I think I'm very, very, very curious about and the role, more so the role of public space in reversing some of these trends of civic decline that we see in the country.
Yeah. With just a few seconds left, I always try to ask people, because Waxar is fundamentally a music station, what your first concert was.
First concert? Oh my goodness.
I love how people respond to this question. I never get tired of it. You are not alone, by the way, in this response. Like some people are like, boom, this. Man. Other people have to think. What's the first one that comes to mind?
I think my first concert might have been seeing Usher in Birmingham in like the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And of course, all of the girls were just, funneling over him. And I was like, but he's an incredible, he's always been an incredible performer. I mean, even then, the guy can move.
How, were you a teenager then?
I was a teenager, yeah.
Teenager
of course.
then? Is that where you grew up?
Yeah.
In Birmingham.
Of course, he can, the guy can dance, he can sing.
Yeah.
He had the six pack, he was doing all the things, but it was incredible, yeah.
According to Natalie, he still does have a six pack. So there we go.
He's in amazing shape. He's in amazing shape. Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. Okay, that's the first Usher. I think that's the first Usher we've had. Okay. Well, Shamichael Hallman, again, people can search for the book and learn more of the TED Talk that I mentioned. Meet me at the library, a place to foster social connection and promote democracy. It's great to have you on here. Really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for
being here. But that is all the time we have this week. If you missed any of the episodes, you can get the full episode at the Daily Memphian site, WYXR, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.